It is 6 p.m. here in Cairo. Time for the news bulletin, and we will be starting straight away with the main headlines. Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati delivers a letter from President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to the Indian Prime Minister. The Palestinian Health Ministry says the Israeli occupation forces killed an 11-year-old Palestinian in the West Bank. And the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky meets the U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House. Minister of Foreign Affairs Badr Abdulati delivered a letter from President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to the Indian Prime Minister over means to enhance the bilateral ties and the strategic partnership between the two states. This came during a meeting the top diplomat had held with Narendra Modi as part of the official visit to New Delhi. Abdulati said that he looks forward to the 8th Egyptian-Indian Joint Committee Convention in Cairo, scheduled for the first half of 2026, asserting the need to exchange divisions over a new mechanism to develop the bilateral economic cooperation, trade and investments. The meeting also tackled the possible cooperation over the international trade corridors in the political and economic aspects. Minister of Foreign Affairs Badr Abdulati met the senior Indian officials and businessmen in the course of the current visit to New Delhi. The top diplomat expressed the Egyptian desire to boost the bilateral ties in different domains and reviewed the state's pivotal role in regional security and stability, most notably the mediation efforts for halting the genocide war in Gaza. The details follow.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Badr Abdulati on Friday said Egypt attaches a top priority to holding the Gaza ceasefire deal with the acceleration of the early recovery and reconstruction of the war-torn Strip and the access of humanitarian aid. The minister made these remarks as he co-chaired the first round of Egyptian-Indian strategic dialogue with Indian Foreign Minister Jai Shankar as part of his current visit to New Delhi, saying he looks forward to the 8th Joint Committee Convention in Cairo, scheduled for the first half of 2026. Egypt's top diplomat reiterated Egypt's firm stance regarding the regional issues, including the developments in Sudan, Libya, Lebanon, and Yemen. Separately, Abdulati reiterated Egypt's keenness in developing consular services provided to Egypt diplomatic missions abroad. The minister made these remarks in a meeting with the representatives of the Egyptian community in New Delhi, where he lauded the important role in supporting the national economy abroad. Meanwhile, in a meeting with Indian media representatives, Egypt's top diplomat reviewed the outcome of the Sharm el-Sheikh Peace Summit. Abdulati detailed Egypt's efforts for halting the Israeli genocide war in Gaza in cooperation with regional partners and the United States, calling all parties to commit to the implementation of the ceasefire deal in support for stability in the Middle East region. On the economic front, Foreign Minister Abdulati said Egypt is keenly interested in attracting Indian investments, particularly in the use of green hydrogen and its derivatives, in line with the 2024 National Strategy for Green Hydrogen. The minister made the remarks as he met chairperson of the Indian energy giant, Okio Energy, stressing Egypt's continued pursuits to diversify clean and sustainable energy resources and decrease carbon emissions.
Hamas called on mediators to push for the next steps under the ceasefire in Gaza, including reopening the border, letting in aid, beginning reconstruction, setting up an administration, and completing the Israeli withdrawal. Hamas said that it remains committed to the ceasefire agreement and to handing over the remaining bodies of the hostages, but that this process may take time. Responding to a call from the resistance group for the assistance with locating the bodies of the 19 hostages buried under the rubble alongside an untold number of Palestinians, Turkey sent specialists to help in the search. Under the ceasefire agreement spearheaded by the U.S. President Donald Trump, Hamas returned 20 surviving hostages and the remains of 9 of 28 known deceased hostages. The United Nations said 560 tons of food had entered Gaza per day on average since the ceasefire took effect, but the convoys were struggling to reach Gaza City due to the war-damaged roads and continued closures of the key northern aid routes. With famine conditions in parts of Gaza, UN Humanitarian Affairs Chief Tom Fletcher said that thousands of aid vehicles would have to enter weekly to tackle the crisis marked by the malnutrition, homelessness, and the collapse of infrastructure. The WFP said it had not begun the distributions in Gaza City, pointing to the continued closure of two border crossings, Tsakim and Derez, with Israel in the north of the enclave, where the humanitarian debacle is most acute. In line with directives by the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, President Fattah al-Sisi, Egypt continued the efforts to provide more humanitarian and relief aid to the Gaza Strip. An aid convoy, the 52nd along the Zaid al-Izz initiative that has been launched by the Egyptian Red Crescent since late July, carried more than 4,000 tons of urgent humanitarian aid. The convoy comprised 1,000 tons of essential food, including baby formula and rice, 700 tons of medical and essential relief supplies, and more than 2,300 tons of petroleum products. The Israeli occupation forces shot dead an 11-year-old boy in the occupied West Bank, while the army claimed the troops opened fire at the rock throwers. The Palestinian Health Ministry said that Muhammad Hallaq was shot dead by the Israeli occupation soldiers in the town of Al-Rihiyya, south of Hebron. The Israeli occupation military said that the soldiers had shot and struck people during the altercation while deployed in Al-Rihiyya. Meanwhile, the Israeli occupation forces shot dead 20-year-old Mehdi Kamel in the West Bank town of Qabatia. Lebanon's health ministry said that the Israeli strikes in the south had killed one person and wounded 7, while the Israeli military said that it had targeted Hezbollah and its allies. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun, however, insisted the Israeli strikes targeted the civilian facilities, condemning what he said was a breach of a ceasefire negotiated last year. Aoun said that he repeated the Israeli aggression comes as part of the systematic policy aimed at destroying the productive infrastructure, hindering the economic recovery, and undermining the national stability under false security pretexts. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky meets Donald Trump at the White House on Friday, seeking the U.S.-made Tomahawk missiles, even as the U.S. President readies for the fresh summit with Russia's Vladimir Putin. Zelensky will be making the third trip to Washington since Trump returned to office. Trump announced that he would be meeting Putin in Budapest in a fresh bid to reach a peace deal and end the Russian-Ukrainian war. Trump added that he hoped to have separate but equal meetings with both Putin and Zelensky. Meanwhile, Russia said that it had captured 3 villages in Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk and Kharkiv regions, including areas Kiev had retaken 3 years ago in a surprise counteroffensive. The Russian forces are slowly advancing again, trying to encircle the important logistics hub of Kupiansk, Ukraine's major gain in the 2022 counteroffensive. Kiev, meanwhile, said that 1 person was killed and 14 were wounded in the Russian shelling in the Ukrainian health part of the region. Russia pounded Ukraine with 70 drones overnight. In Madagascar, the military leader, Colonel Michael Randrianarina, was sworn in as president after the military took power in the island nation this week, following protests that forced Andry Rajoelina to flee. Rajoelina has condemned the takeover and refused to step down, despite the widespread defections in the security forces. Randrianarina said earlier that the military had taken power and dissolved all the institutions except the lower house of parliament or the National Assembly. He also said that the committee led by the military would rule for up to 2 years. alongside the transitional government before organizing new elections. The Ministry of Petroleum and Mineral Resources announced an adjustment to the local fuel prices, raising prices by nearly 18%. The Petroleum Ministry said that the government would freeze the domestic fuel prices for at least a year after Friday's rise, citing the local, regional and global developments. Prices for diesel were raised by 2 Egyptian pounds to 17.50 pounds per litre from 15.50 pounds. The government said that it would continue to subsidize diesel, even if that required raising the prices of other fuels above the cost to help cover the subsidy. Gasoline prices increased by as much as 12.7% depending on the grade, with 80-octane gasoline rising to 17.75 pounds per litre, while 92-octane rose to 19.25 pounds, and 95-octane increased to 21 pounds. Minister of Planning, Economic Development and International Cooperation, Al-Mashot, met with the Managing Director of the European Investment Bank and reviewed the means to enhance the partnership, as well as the wide range of joint cooperation files. The meeting also discussed the efforts to secure an 1.8 billion euro investment with the European Union to be allocated for financing the private sector development. Minister Al-Mashot asserted that the cooperation with the EIB is one of the main aspects of the strategic partnership between Egypt and the European Union's institutions. And this brings us to the end of the news bulletin for today. Thank you for watching and goodbye.